and look specifically at the testing and maintenance of our emergency lighting systems. So again, Roger's already mentioned it, but under the RRO, the responsible person is required to make sure that any emergency routes and exits must be indicated by signs, and any emergency routes and exits requiring illumination must be provided with emergency lighting of adequate intensity in the case of failure of normal lighting. Also under the RRO, any facilities, devices, products in relation to the order must be subject to a suitable system of maintenance, are maintained in an efficient state, in efficient working order, and in good repair. Quite a mouthful, that last sentence. Basically, you as the responsible person, the building owner, the employer, need to make sure that not only the emergency lighting is there and fit for purpose, but also that it's working throughout the lifetime of the installation as well. And we saw towards the end of last year a number of articles appearing in some of the lighting magazines with regards to building owners, mainly landlords, being fined for having non-compliant emergency lighting. In fact, in one case, there was a landlord who was fined just over £400,000 for being found to be in breach of fire and health and safety regulations. So people are looking out for this. People are looking to see if things are compliant. So when it comes to testing of our emergency lighting systems, the RRO doesn't actually go into specific details about how often we have to test, just that our system needs to be in a good working state, in good condition. So if anything were to go wrong, I think you need to be able to prove to the enforcing officer that you've actually managed to keep your system well maintained. And the best way to do this is to follow the guidance out in BS 5266 and 50172 in terms of testing and testing regimes. But before we look at the different types of tests and how often we should test, I just want to draw your attention to this statement in section 10 of BS 5266 in regards to handover and sort of link to testing and logbooks. There's a lot of text here, so I'm just going to highlight the first paragraph and read this out to you. It says that the competent person handing over the system to the responsible person should train that person or persons on the regular monthly tests and inspections and how to use the test facilities or to check the automatic test facilities. And same as Roger, I just wonder how often this actually happens, that the person that ultimately is responsible for the emergency lighting is actually trained on how to do the tests, or at least how to read the results from an automatic test system. So when we look at testing, the standards, the guides recommend 3 main tests to be carried out for your emergency lighting. The first is a daily visual inspection. This relates only to central battery systems, and it's just to go in and check that your system is in a ready condition, a ready state. So basically just open the door, wave at the thing, make sure it's all right, and then that's that one done. There's no need to do any actual testing. The second is a monthly function test. So once a month we're required to switch all our emergency luminaires over to battery power to make sure that they come on. It's a good opportunity as well just to go around and look at your emergency lights and make sure they're clean, they're not broken, nothing's damaged, and they're where they need to be. Then once you're happy with that, reapply healthy mains, and then again, just go around and check all your emergency lights. Just check the charge indicator to make sure that actually the batteries are charging again. And then the last sort of test is a full rated duration test, which is to be carried out once a year. So once a year, you need to make sure that your emergency luminaires are going to last their full duration, which is typically 3 hours in the UK. So again, similar to the monthly test, we need to switch our emergency luminaires over to battery power, and then this time wait around for 3 hours and make sure they're all still working at the end of the 3 hours. Once you're happy with that, again, just go around and just check all the charge indicators to make sure that they're charging again. Now, because once you carry out this test, there's still a possibility that there may be an actual emergency situation straight after or during the recharge period of the batteries. It's recommended that this test is carried out at a period of low risk for your building. Now, not everywhere has a period of low risk. For example, hospitals, there's never really a low risk time in a hospital. If this is the case with your premises, with your building, then you need to make sure that there's some form of alternative method available in terms of emergencies and emergency lighting, whether it be rechargeable torches, for example. So that's how often we need to test. And there's 3 sort of main ways we can do our testing as well. The first and probably the simplest is a key switch. So to initiate a mains test, walk over to your key switch on the wall, just flip it with a little fish key. The next is a self-test system. Now this is where our emergency luminaires have a small bit of intelligence, and they're programmed to once a month and once a year sort of randomly test themselves to make sure they're passing their various tests. And depending on the results of the test, if everything's okay, they can show their status via an indicator LED. So if everything's okay, you have a green indicator. If there's something wrong, it will typically be a red indicator. And depending on your manufacturer and the system you're using, this will give you an idea of what might be wrong. So a fast flashing LED could be a lamp failure, whereas a slow flashing LED could be a battery failure. And with this type of system, again, it's recommended that once a month, someone just goes around and checks all the indicator LEDs. It's all good and well having a system that can tell you when something's wrong, but no one's actually going around and checking the LEDs. No one's actually going to know if anything's gone wrong. And the third system is a central test system. This is where our emergency luminaires are all wired back to a control system, whether this be dedicated for emergency or part of our wider controls package. The advantage of this system are that we can schedule tests. So whereas with a self-test system, they just happen randomly throughout the year, with a central test system, we can tell them when we want to do the testing. So thinking of our annual duration test, if you know that your building's not occupied on Christmas Day or Boxing Day, then you could set your system up so it carries out its full rated duration test on Christmas Eve, knowing you've got at least 48 hours for your batteries to recharge when no one's going to be in the building. And actually 5266 does recommend that if the responsible person can't guarantee that manual tests can be carried out, actually an automated test system such as this or a self-test system should be used. Often I think people are put off from using a central test system, partially because of the costs involved in terms of installation and the upfront cost. So again, I've done another total cost of ownership, looking at the on-site costs for testing and then the installation costs for a central test system compared to a manual test system, just to see the difference between the two. So the top table is showing our on-site costs. So our manual test system, it took roughly 5 minutes per luminaire to check all of these for our monthly function test. It's only a small installation, about 100 luminaires. Then for our full rated duration, we've got 3 hours to wait for our luminaires to discharge and then go around and check them all. At a cost of £35 per hour, we were looking at just under £4,400 per year for testing. With our central test system, it's only a small system whereby the tests are initiated by a panel on the wall. It only took 20 minutes for the test results to come back, and if there were any failures, it pops up on the panel that shows you where it is, so you don't have to go around and check all your luminaires. In terms of the duration test, the system was split over two circuits, two dialing networks. So we tested each of one of those individually. So we did one, and then we did the next one. At a cost of £35 per hour, we were looking at just under £400 per year for testing costs. Obviously, the central test system is more expensive to install. The luminaires are more expensive to buy. There's going to be additional costs in terms of installation and wiring, and then you need to allow for probably a couple of days in terms of commissioning the system as well. So in terms of upfront costs, you were looking at just under £8,000 for your manual test and just over £13,000 for your central test system. So over a 5-year period, if you compare these to each other, even though the central test system was almost twice that of the manual test system on day one, over a 5-year period, actually the central test system cost half that of the manual test system. And that's all purely because of the on-site testing costs. The central test system paid itself back in just over a year. This is assuming that all maintenance that needs to be required out, whether it be early failures or just natural end of life of components, is the same across both systems. So that's how often we need to test and the sort of test systems we can use to carry out our tests. Now I want to look at logbooks and how to record all this information. And again, the RRO doesn't go into specific details in terms of how to record all this information in regards to logbooks, just that the enforcing officer has under their powers the right to be able to request any information in relation to this. Now luckily for us, and Roger's already touched on it, 5266 has a few annexes at the back to give us guidance in terms of how to carry out completion certificates and logging our test results. When it comes to completion certificates, it's recommended that on the installation of a new system or a major alteration of an existing system, that the building owner, the occupier, is presented with a completion certificate and logbook. And Annex H and Annex I have examples of logbooks for this, looking at areas such as design, installation, verification. When it comes to actually recording results of our testing, Annex M is an example of test certification, which gives you your spaces for your monthly function tests, and then a space for your annual duration test. And then it also has a section as well for maintenance. So if your results from the test come back that there's a problem with your fittings, you can note this down when it was recorded, but then you can also note down what was carried out in terms of rectification of the problem and who by. And over the lifetime of your emergency lighting installation, you're going to be required to do some form of maintenance, whether it's through natural end of life of components, or perhaps components have failed early. Now this again, it falls under the requirements of the responsible person. However, the responsible person may not be the competent person to carry out the tasks. And actually 5266 defines the competent person as a person with the relevant current training and experience, and with access to the requisite tools, equipment, information, and capable of carrying out a defined task. I just wonder how many people here would be able to hold their hands up and say that they are a competent person when it comes to maintaining an emergency lighting system. Anyone? One at the front. So when we're looking at our emergency luminaires in terms of when they may require maintenance or something's gone wrong, the first place to look is obviously your charge indicators. If this has gone out, then it indicates there is some form of problem. So you should check your AC supply, your main supply to your fitting to make sure this hasn't failed. You could then check your charging circuitry to make sure nothing's happened to the charging circuitry, the batteries aren't charged anymore. Or even just as simple as just checking the batteries haven't somehow just become disconnected. And batteries are another sort of component that will fail over the lifetime of your installation. When we're changing batteries, we need to make sure that the new batteries are compatible with the same system being used for the old batteries. So in terms of cell chemistry and charging method, NiCad batteries like to be permanently charged, nickel metal hydride batteries like to be intermittently charged. Get it the wrong way round, and it can lead to short-circuiting, overheating, and ultimately early failure of components. The new batteries should be able to withstand the same temperature parameters of the old batteries. There's no point in putting new batteries in if they can't withstand the heat of the environment. Are the new batteries the same number of cells, the same amp hours? Are they going to be able to last the duration they're meant to be rated to? And again, just making sure that the batteries are the correct size. There's no point in having new batteries if they're twice the size of the old batteries and they won't physically fit into the luminaire you're trying to get them in. And then lamps. Lamps are another component that may fail within our emergency lighting installations. LED modules, a good LED module these days typically has a very low failure rate. When it comes to conventional sources, see if your lamp's failed, try and replace it as soon as possible after it's failed, or perhaps look out for indications that the lamp may be soon about to fail, such as increased blackening of the ends, or that the luminaire started to have a lower output than expected. So just to summarise, that the RRO requires the responsible person to make sure that there is emergency lighting that is fit for purpose within their premises and that is maintained over the lifetime of the installation. Any test records need to be kept and should be made available to the enforcing officer when requested. And the best way to show compliance with the RRO is to follow the regimes and logbooks set out in BS 5266 and 50172. And finally, if manual testing can't be guaranteed by the responsible person, then some form of automated system should be looked at. Thank you.